Hello, we're in our fractions unit again, and we are looking at adding and subtracting mixed numbers, which is lesson 5.3 out of our textbook. And our learning target for today says that I can add and subtract mixed numbers. Here's some vocab for us. Common denominator is a denominator that is the same in two or more fractions. So 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, those all have a common denominator. Okay? When you are trying to find the least common denominator, if you do not know what it would be, you can always multiply both of the denominators together and it will give you a common denominator. An improper fraction is a fraction where the numerator is larger than the denominator. So this would be 14 halves, 10 thirds, 48 fifths, anything like that where our numerator is bigger than our denominator. And these improper fractions can be written as mixed numbers, and that's what we're looking at today, is adding and subtracting mixed numbers. Here's the steps that you should make sure to have written down in your notebook. First, rewrite fractions with the same common denominator. Then we add or subtract the numerators, keep the denominator the same. If the fraction is an improper fraction, rewrite, but don't forget to add to the whole number, and then add the whole numbers together and simplify. Okay, we'll explain this more as we go through. So remember to use estimation to help solve fraction operations as a check to see if your answer makes sense. Okay, here's our first example to look at, 7 4/9 plus 10 2/9. So first I'm going to go ahead and estimate these. 7 4/9 is close to 7 1/2. Okay, and 10 2/9, I'm going to round it down to 10, which add those two together. 7 plus 10 is 17. Add the half. So our answer should be somewhere around 17 1/2. Now when we actually add these together, 4/9, I'm going to start with the fractions, adding those together, plus 2/9. They already have a common denominator, so we can just add the numerators. 4 plus 2 is 6. Denominator stays the same. Now we add the whole numbers together. 7 plus 10 equals 17. Put those together into 17 and 6/9. Now the 6/9 can be simplified by dividing both of them by 3. So 17 and 2/3. Okay. Now we go back and look. 17 and 2/3. When I did my estimate, I got 17 1/2. It's a little bit larger than that, which makes sense because we dropped this 2/9 here when we did our estimate. So an answer of 17 and 2/3 does make sense. All right, here are a few for you to try on your own and then come back and check your answer. 6 halves plus 6 and 1/8 plus 2 5/8. I'm going to start with adding the fractions, so 1/8 plus 5/8. Okay. Add the numerators together. Now add the whole numbers. Put the whole number and the fraction together. Simplify. Okay. Divide both of these by 2. Our whole number stays the same. That does not get simplified at all. 6/8 turns into 3/4. Okay. 8 and 3/4. And if we were to have done a estimate from the beginning, 6 and 1/8 is close to 6. 2 and 5/8 is pretty close to 2 1/2. So when we add those together, that'll be 8 1/2, and again it's a little bit more because we have the 1/8 and the 5/8 there. So this answer makes sense. Next one, 5 and 1/5 plus 2 and 3/10. Okay. Now the 1/5 and the 3/10, they do not have a common denominator, so I'm going to get a common denominator of 10 for these. Right now I'm just looking at the fractions. So 1/5 becomes 2/10 plus 3/10 equals 5/10. 5 plus 2 equals 7. That becomes 7 and 5/10, which we can simplify down by dividing the numerator and denominator by 2, and we would, or sorry, by 5, and we would get 7 and 1/2. And if we were to have done our estimating from the start, 5 and 1/5 is close to 5. I'm going to round 2 and 3/10 up to 2.5. Add those together, and you would get 7.5, which is exactly what we got. So that answer is good. Last one here, 1 and 5/9 plus 4 and 1/6. We can get a common denominator of 18, so we times this by 2. So we would have 10/18 times this by 3. Add the whole numbers together. Put my whole number and the fraction together to get a mixed number, and our answer is 5 and 13/18, and that cannot be simplified at all. Okay, now we are looking at subtracting mixed numbers. Same steps as before, but now instead of addition, we're just doing subtraction. So let's start with our estimating. 8 and 5/6 is close to 9. 2 and 1/3 is close to 2, so 9 minus 2 is 7, so our answer should be somewhere around 7. Now, we do not have a common denominator, so we need to get one, which I'm going to see is 6, so the 5/6 stays the same. Multiply this one by 2. Okay, 1 times 2 is 2, denominator becomes 6. Now, 5 minus 2 is 3, denominator stays the same. Now we subtract our whole numbers. 8 minus 2 equals 6. Put your whole number and your fraction together again. 6 and 3/6. We can divide both of these by 3. So our final answer is 6 and 1/2. Okay. Which, if we look back at our estimate, we got 7, which would make sense with the way we rounded. So I would say that answer is reasonable. Here's some for you to try now on your own, and then come back and check your answers. 5 and 4/5 minus 1 and 3/10, we can get a common denominator of 10. So we'd multiply this one by 2. 4/5 becomes 8/10 minus 3/10. 8 minus 3 equals 5/10. 5 minus 1 equals 4, so we have an answer of 4 and 5/10, and I can simplify this by dividing numerator and denominator by 5, and I would get an answer of 4 and 1/2. And again, if we had done an estimate on this one, 5 and 4/5 is close to 6. 1 and 3/10 is pretty close to 1.5. Which would get you to your 4.5. So that answer does make sense. Next one, 13 and 7/8 minus 9 and 3/4. I see a common denominator of 8. So 7/8 minus 6/8 equals 1/8. 13 minus 9 equals 4. So we put those together. 4 and 1/8 can't be simplified at all. Now this one would be close to 14 minus 10, which equals 4, which is close to our answer, so that does make sense. Last one here, 8 and 2/3 minus 1.5, a common denominator of 6. This is one of those cases where you see if you multiply them by the denominator by the denominator of the other fraction, you get a common denominator. So we have 4/6 minus 3/6, which equals 1/6. 8 minus 2 equals 6. Those get put together to be 6 and 1/6. Again, this is close to 9 minus 2.5, Well, 9 minus 2 is 7, minus another half is 6.5, which is pretty close to 6 1/6, so that answer does make sense. Okay, now when we are subtracting mixed numbers and we look at this one, 2 1/3 minus 1 2/3, we look at the fractions, the 1/3 minus 2/3, and we cannot do that. So that we have to do something different for this one. But first, let's go ahead and estimate. 2 1/3 is close to 2. 1 2/3 is close to 1.5. So 2 minus 1.5 equals 1/2. So our answer should be somewhere around there. Okay? So now when we are doing this and we are looking at our fractions, 2 1/3 minus 1 2/3, like I said, we can't subtract our fractions, so what we're going to do is we're going to rename the mixed number. So I'm going to take the 2 1/3, and I'm going to make it into I'm going to take one of these whole numbers here, and I'm going to change it into 3/3. So one of them equals 3/3. Okay, so I just took one of the whole numbers, so technically now I would have 1, a 3/3, and a 1/3. Okay, I just turned that number into that. So now 3/3 and 1/3 is 4/3, so we would have 1 4/3 minus 1 2/3. Okay. Again, now we subtract like we did before. We subtract our fractions. 4/3 minus 2/3 equals 2/3. And then our whole numbers, 1 minus 1 equals 0. So our answer is just 2/3, which is close to 1/2. Now we have 8 minus 3 3/4. Let's start with our estimate. 3 3/4 is close to 4, so 8 minus 4 is 4, so our answer should be somewhere around there. Now, when we are looking at this 8, we don't have another part of a fraction, so we just have the whole number. So I'm going to turn this 8 into 7 4/4. So I just split this into 7 4/4. So I took one whole of the 8 and made it into a fraction. And I'm using fourths because on our other part we have 3/4. Okay, so now we have 7 4/4 minus 3 3/4. So we take our 4/4 minus 3/4 equals 1/4. 7 minus 3 equals 4. So our answer is 4 1/4, which is close to our estimate. Okay, so you're just taking one of the whole number and turning it into adding it to the fraction. Here's some for you to try on your own, and then come back and check. 11 2/5 minus 2 3/5. So I'm going to take one of those 11s and make it into fifths. So now I have 2/5 plus 5/5 equals 7/5. So my new 11 2/5 becomes 10 7/5 minus 2 that's a 3/5. 7/5 minus 3/5 equals 4/5. 10 minus 2 equals 8. So our answer for this one is 8 4/5. Alright, next one, 5 3/8 minus 11/12. First of all, looking at the fractions of 3/8 and 11/12, I'm going to get a common denominator for those, okay, which I know is 24. So times by 3 for each of these. So our new answer here is 5 9/24. I want to make sure that I know that that's a 9. Minus 4 times each of these by 2, and 22/24. Now, when I turn one of those 5s into a 24th, I would have 4 and then 9 plus 24 would be 33 24ths minus 4 and 22 24ths. 4 minus 4 equals 0. 33 24ths minus 22 24ths would be 11 24ths. Okay? And if we were to do our estimating for this one, 5 3/4 is, or 5 3/8 is close to 5 1/2. 4 and 11 12ths is close to 5, so minus 5, which is 1/2, and 11 24ths is close to half. So that answer does make sense. Last one here, 7 minus 1 1/2. Okay. Again, I'm going to take one of those 7s, I'm going to make it 6, and 2 halves. So that 2 halves is equal to 1, so 6 and 1 is 7, so that's why we can do that. Minus 1 1/2. 6 minus 1 equals 5. 2 halves minus 1/2 equals 1/2. So our answer, 5 1/2. Okay, you can go back and rewatch any parts of this video if you are still stuck. You can also look in your video at the examples and the tutoring videos in your online textbook. Go ahead and head on over and take your NICU quiz.